Welcome to Pond. My name is Mitch Stein. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and Chief Impact Officer. We want to make tech work for good. So we're highlighting and uplifting the critical parts of the impact technology ecosystem through human conversations with the leaders and shapers of the industry. Let's jump in.
Meet Neil Shah and Neil Parikh, a founding pair with a lot more in common than just their first names. They have a shared frustration with inefficiencies in philanthropy, so they've dedicated the past decade to maximize the impact of corporate giving.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Founder and our first double Meet the Founder session. So I'm really excited to hear both of your stories and talk more about Amply. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and your organization.
Great. Thank you for having us. So I'm Neil Parikh. I'm a co-founder of Amply.
And I'm Neil Shah, one of the founders of Amply. Amply provides tools for nonprofits to maximize employer matching opportunities. Donors are able to identify where they work, and we drive the match process so that you don't have to, and you can engage more strategically with donors and the companies where they work. Most of the clients that we work with see up to 10% more in fundraising through corporate matching opportunities using our software.
Thanks, Neil. And could you share with us a bit about, I'm sure there's a great story to be told, what really moved the two of you to found an impact business together?
Amply was started back in 2010, and it was born out of an idea that Neil Shah and I both had on where can we help solve some of the inefficiencies in the relationships between private and public in corporate giving to the nonprofit space. It actually, both of us were on a relief trip in Haiti. And while we were, certainly in awe of all the different efforts and generosity from really all around the world, and particularly from the private sector, we also saw how the amount of inefficiencies in the actual deployment of the resources down to the ultimate end users. And it became a space that really sort of fascinated us, charged us up. And the place that we started with was trying to solve what was a pretty arcane system of employer matching and corporate giving to charities. It literally started with us, filling out PDFs by hand on behalf of charities. And then recognize, there is a much more scalable system here, which turned into what we are today, a software plugin that enables charities to seamlessly trigger and facilitate the matching process of their donations by companies. It helps the donors, charities, and companies all, and ultimately, helps truly double, triple the impact of donations in many situations.
Amazing. And from that vision or idea or realization in Haiti, when the two of you are together, what do you think has been the biggest change or evolution in the company from that starting off point over the past 11 years?
At its core, we've always thought about how we can maximize philanthropy. And we started with a really simple idea of corporate social responsibility. There are so many large businesses out there that want to make an impact on behalf of their employees, right, and offer this as an employee benefit. But it's been a very arcane process, as Neil mentioned. What we have pivoted to is only thinking bigger. How do we get more small businesses? How do we automate corporate social responsibility platforms to make it easier for donors, right? 10 years ago when we started, there were all these PDFs that a donor would have to print out, mail, or they have to sign it, mail it to the nonprofit, sign it, and the nonprofit would send it to the company. The company would then send a physical check. You're talking about a turnaround process that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, takes 6 months. And the core vision was, how do we make that more simple and efficient and streamlined? And today we actually advise small businesses. We often get reach out from small businesses around the country who are looking like, how do we create a matching program? How do we do this? And nonprofits are like, hey, there's all these local businesses, and we think they want to support us, but we don't know how to reach out to them. And so the interconnection of those two parties is really important to us. And we've been thinking about tools to maximize philanthropy on that way. The other side of the coin is with donors. What we've seen very steadily over the last couple of years is an increase in the average donation a donor makes. And when you offer a match opportunity and you tell that donor upfront during the donation process, they are likely to increase their gift. So if a company has a minimum of $25 for a match, then they were thinking, oh, I was just going to make a $20 donation. But if I make 25, then my company matches maybe even a two to one ratio, right? A lot of companies are now increasing the ratios. And so you turn it into $75. And that is a meaningful amount of money for a nonprofit that adds up over hundreds of donations. So we want to encourage donors to give more with their companies as well.
Yeah, that's great. And you've obviously learned so much over the last decade, probably also seen countless number of nonprofit tech tools come and go. What do you feel like really differentiates Amply from direct competitors or just like other nonprofit tech businesses out there?
At least four main things that differentiate us. One, we care deeply about the performance of matching. So we're involved and we get our hands dirty with the whole match process. We respond to donor inquiries. We're a performance-based solution. So a lot of our nonprofits pay a percentage of whatever we help raise. If it doesn't work, they don't pay. The other thing is that we're starting to build out tools that allow a nonprofit to understand who is reaching out, who is like engaging with them, what are those company policies, and is there a way for me to, as a nonprofit, engage with those donors, engage with those companies. So some of the tools we built out and thought about is, okay, if I'm in Texas, local businesses want to support me. Who are those businesses today that I'm getting donations? And what are the contacts at those companies? So we're seeing more of our nonprofits use those tools to reach out and engage strategically in fundraising. And that's the whole principle behind our tool. Make it really simple to automate matching, and nonprofits no longer have to deal with all that mess, so they can use their time and personnel to focus on strategic engagement. The second big area that we're different from is that we're the only company that processes those paper forms digitally. So we've taken that whole thing where you have to, print out a form, and so we auto-populate it with in-house built technology, and the donor just gets an email, click to sign, nonprofit, click to sign, and then we generate a packet that is sent to those companies for matching. The third area is that we have a customer support service, as I mentioned, for donors, that other platforms may just leave it to the nonprofits to handle. Right. And so those tools are all available for nonprofits rather than having to respond directly to donors.
I think that's super helpful. I've heard firsthand a lot of, everyone wants a cheaper option or free option, and they think, oh yeah, that's fine. We don't need the customer service piece. And then that's like always their biggest complaint after the fact. So it's just good to know all that upfront. That's great. And I know you talked about your work in Haiti and how that's kind of spurred the initial idea, but as you've been working on this over the past 10 years, has there been, and maybe each of you might have a different story, but like a specific cause or specific organization that you think back on and really keeps you going when this job gets hardest?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We started with disaster response. And I think that is still something that is near and dear to our hearts, and actually some of the very early organizations that helped us get on the scene were in the disaster response space. And then it's actually very proud to think about that the very first charity that we started working with, Team Rubicon, 10 years ago, still is a near and dear partner of ours nearly a decade later. And just so tremendously proud of their growth and then what they have done now globally over this past decade. But the truth is, I think what generates probably the most pride is how the number of different causes that we get to be involved in. Over this past decade, it has literally spanned every single sort of sector that you can think about. And it's it's something that I think we actually take a lot of pride in that we are able to help support and get behind really anyone's mission. In 2020, I think we tried to take that to a different level internally, and really tried to see if there were some causes that spoke to the hearts of our employees, and figured out ways that we could then support that. I would say not surprisingly, many of these causes aligned with what was going on a national and global scale, ranging from COVID to the racial injustice movement to really thinking about voter disenfranchisement. And these were things and ideas that were generated by our employees and asked us, the founders, like, what can we do? Where can we do more? And we then created, sort of unique efforts around all three of those, that I think are now going to be sort of a starting point for even ourselves to think about. I know it sounds a little bit silly that we were in a business of thinking about corporate social responsibility for others. This was very much a time that forced us to look inward and see what can we do to certainly practice what we preach. And we're really excited about how we were able to engage this past year. And I think it's going to be a jumping point for us to do more in the years to come.
It's an interesting quandary as an impact startup. At some point, you become your own company and you're like, wait a second, we have to do all those things we were helping others do. I think that happens for most startups where it's like, you don't get the free pass anymore.
I totally agree. And it is, I will tell you, it is something that the two of us talked about from day one. And it was very much part of our ethos from day one. But I think it also was sort of a reflection about how we've grown as a company, that we were actually able to do things in a way that we potentially weren't able to do so before for our own team.
Right. And, when you talk about your ethos and your team and how you've grown and how that's had to evolve, if you had to pick one word that described the culture of your company, what would it be?
I'm going to go with two words.
Okay, fine.
Impact, and then service. It's a very, very important part of our interview process. It's very much part of our team meetings. We want to preserve time to think about, to reflect on not only the sort of the principles of why you want to join a social impact company, but then also reinforcing to our team and to ourselves that we are actually generating impact, and that has to be the primary motivator for what we do next, where we grow into. And very related is on the impact side is, at the end of the day, our true goal is to allow nonprofits to do what they do better, by hopefully extracting some of this administrative work from them. We are able to, as Neil Shah was speaking about earlier, we're allowing them to open up their bandwidth, their resources, their mind space to be able to focus on the real causes, and hopefully with extra dollars in their pocket to do so because of the work that we're doing behind the scenes.
And you may have just kind of answered this question, but I'll ask it more directly. Like the amount of money left on the table by not exercising matching gifts in this country, I'm sure you have the stat handy, is astonishing. Why is that the case? And how can we, short of shaking leaders at nonprofits, 2 million of them around the country, how can you get people focused on that problem?
It's mind-boggling that so much money is left on the table, but it's challenging for nonprofits to deal with. And I'll give you a couple of reasons. So the number has been estimated at around $7 to $10 billion of matchable funds are not matched. So that means these Fortune 500, mostly Fortune 500 companies have millions of employees that do donate, but they're not taking advantage of a matching program. Now, there's a couple of reasons of why that is. One is nonprofits are very busy. They're doing a lot of different things, and there isn't necessarily a staff member who is dedicated to this. Now, when you're not dedicated to it and you don't have anything listed on your site about a matching gift program, the donors don't bother, right? You're making a gift for $100, $50. You're not going to go and find out what your company policy is. You're not going to contact HR. So the most basic thing a nonprofit can do, and we tell them all the time, is just mention match, like your company may match, put it on your receipts, put a little simple page up on your site that talks about corporate matching opportunities, and they may take that action. The next best thing you can do is add a quick way to search for a company matching policy. We offer those tools. And a donor can just click on that after the gift. Now, the best thing you can do is do it during the time of donation. So when they're donating, capture what company they work at, and then guide them through that process. And nonprofits are just not aware of these tools. So every time we talk to a nonprofit that has not heard about these tools, they're just like, sign me up, right? It blows their mind that they are not taking advantage of these things. And they're simply not aware of how much money is left on the table, right? And I think that's probably the biggest reason of why more nonprofits are not using tools like ours.
I mean, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like it's a go-to-market challenge, because it sounds like when you get in the room and you explain it to someone, they're like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Like, yeah, we need to use that, right? But, could you just explain a little bit where you see that challenge crop up, how you think it could be improved? It's obviously in a lot of ways out of your control or any of your competitors' control to fix.
There are a lot of fundraising platforms that over the years began offering tools like ours. And that's a really easy, it's like a more systematic way to make it discoverable rather than us, doing tons of marketing direct to nonprofits. So as much as possible, we like to educate the platforms on this opportunity, and sometimes they're resource constrained, and hopefully nonprofits push them, like the really savvy nonprofits, push them to make these tools available. And so over the long term, you can imagine more platforms offer this, and it's a simple one click to get started. And that's what we try to do as much as possible, make it as low barrier to entry activation as possible.
And so, you mentioned those really savvy nonprofits. Size is not an indicator of that, as I think that's a common misconception in the space, that larger ones know how to do things better. When you see someone that is really exercising best practices around broader corporate engagement beyond just matching, what stands out? What are the leaders? What do they do? What are the skills they have that make them really good at maximizing corporate engagement opportunities?
I think that they are invested in the partnership and upfront training. So they realize this is an opportunity. That's the first thing. It's just awareness that there are matching dollars out there that they're not capturing. The second thing they do is try to get involved to an extent upfront, and you do a little bit more work upfront to understand how to make sure donors will respond to the opportunities. So simple things like, crafting a message, crafting a narrative, making sure all these pages exist and are accessible. And then, regularly following up on what are other opportunities I'm missing out on, and what can we do to maximize. And our service is really meant to be very low touch. Like, you could log in once a month and be maximizing all the opportunities out there. And that's all we ask for. But unfortunately, nonprofits have, as most companies do, like churn in employees. And so you have fundraisers who come in. And so you want to really institutionalize the attitude towards matching gifts and make it part of not your budget, but just like part of your annual practice to make sure it's like there. And so the most savvy nonprofits begun to like forecast, right? And we try to help in that process as well. And we even prepare reports on, for every dollar you've spent with us, in our solution, how much more have you raised? And then make sure that gets circulated all within their company, right? In their nonprofit, rather.
Yeah, and then, people become ambassadors either in that organization, or if they churn, right, and they leave and go to another, which statistics show that's going to happen within 18 months on average. Having those use cases and the ROI, as people like to say, to take their next organization is super helpful. That's awesome.
Right.
And I guess on the company side, because I think we've gotten a good understanding of where nonprofits do a good job advocating for and leveraging these resources. What about at a company? You mentioned small businesses. Like, how do you get that sort of groundswell movement to do more, either offer more for your employees from a CSR perspective, matching gift, et cetera, or get people to use them once they exist, which is the big problem with money being left on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point is as Neil Shah was mentioning, is awareness. They're generally speaking, the folks that you meet, they want to do something. It's not about the energy; it's about how they apply it. And I think part of this is, how do you give some simple guidance on the different ways, the effective ways to be able to not just capture your own energy, but then your employees' energy towards causes. There are some sort of real tactical things that come into play. You do see companies that try to steer their employees into very sort of narrow donation opportunities, like you have to donate through this platform in order to activate these types of matching opportunities. And it works from a data tracking perspective for the companies, but in a lot of ways, it's actually not meeting their employees where they are, because more often than not, employees are donating through a variety of other channels than that one company platform. And so one of the big education things that we try to do is have companies understand how it is that their employees want to give, and then help set up these opportunities in all of those other places, and not just try to drive employees into one way of giving. So I'd say that that's one really big, important sort of differentiating thing. The second thing is, and something that we both know that we would love to extend and get into, is it's not about just exclusively donation dollars, but it's also capturing the other ways that employees like to provide service. There are a number of volunteer programs that are out there. This is a space that I think is very interesting and exciting to us. It again speaks to the types of things that we would like to support, but just understanding and helping companies educate that there are ways to also encourage those types of activities, whether it be from a team building aspect, or actually, a way that we are going to sort of double down on those efforts that employees would like to put out there. And then the last thing I would also say is, and I would say this is important for both the company and the nonprofit side, but it's sort of embrace the champions. There are often, I think the ones that in the pre-COVID era, the ones that you would often see really jump out were the walkathons and the marathons, and those individuals being able to rally their colleagues to help kind of support that cause, and collectively really making that thermometer reach all the way to the top. It is really, really important to be able to identify, support those champions. And I think that responsibility sits both on the on the company side and on the nonprofit side. And that's one of the spaces where our tool really can help, because you get to see the data, you get to see who the employees are, you get to see how many employees from various different companies are supporting that cause. Are there actually engagement opportunities that you can take from that and leverage in the future, and build out any other kind of either programming or opportunities? So it really is important to kind of, not just in a traditional CSR way, but go one CRM way, I should say. Go one level deeper and actually see how are they actually inspiring their colleagues to drive impact and provide service.
Yeah, it's a community building exercise, right? Yeah. And so you've got to find those advocates and champions that are gonna, community forms around champions in a way. So yeah, I completely agree. And I'd be curious, between the two of you as a co-founder pair, I know you have the same name, but I'm sure you bring different things, very different things to the table. Like, how would you sum up your own relationship between the two of you, and how do you see that kind of play out in how you've led the company?
I'll start, and probably should have led with this fun fact. We have actually been child friends since childhood. We went to elementary school and junior high together, and in many ways, stayed close friends throughout. And in many ways, when this opportunity at Haiti came about, we I don't know. It was a very, very both uplifting and enriching sort of recrossing of the roads around something that we both has been, deeply, deeply in our own ways been working in the nonprofit, charity, and the giving spaces. So I think a lot of it was just like fortuitous and coincidental timing. But ever since then, I think the relationship is only something that is, it's like a partnership. It's a constant looking at each other, making sure that we are aligned on our views, on our mission, on what we want to do for not just our clients, but for our employees. And that has fostered, a much deeper lifelong connection between the two of us.
Just to add to that, we offer very different skill sets as well, and I think that in a partnership like this, right? Like I've been at a number of startups, and it's really important to have that alignment, to have that really strong foundation. Neil's a doctor. I'm a lawyer. We also have these different skill sets. I've been working in technology for 10 years, building different products. When for me, it was just like I had an idea. And as we got talking, Neil also has a lot of the empathy and connection with nonprofit causes to figure out how to bring this solution to market. So what's been really wonderful is we can build a bunch of tools, but how do we make sure we're maximizing the different opportunities out there for nonprofits? And as we think about where does this company head in the next 5-10 years, we want people to give more, whether that's individuals and companies. If every single employee at a company were to clamor for an employee matching program, you'd see this as a standard benefit. And you see that at a lot of profitable companies. And I've been at companies that were unprofitable and then they became profitable and then started offering these types of programs. And you need that champion. So employees need to have it as part of their own kind of like deep down belief to give back and to ask their employers to match, right? And you'll see companies who can make a huge impact by offering things like 3-to-1, 10-to-1 match ratios, which Apple and some very large employers do offer some big matching ratios.
And I guess I would just wrap up by, I've been asking the questions. If you have any questions for me that I could answer before we hop off.
You've had a chance to meet with a number of different folks. I would love to kind of hear what are some of the themes that you've extracted that usually sort of define success and sustainability, because it's a space that you have to be invested in at a personal level, but it is not one of those places where there are going to be many unicorns that emerge out of that. So what is it that really keeps people going and allows them to maintain and sustain and deliver impact in the long term?
That's what fascinates me most about like impact technology. It's a lot of people who in the prevailing system probably could have made a lot more money doing something else, but they really followed their own passions and who they are. And I think succeeding in that realm is all about, if you can identify at your core, like who you are, what your mission is, and it's so obvious how that's reflected in the company you start. That's what I've seen in every one of these conversations is that if they're successful, it's because it rings so true to who they are, and like following that light takes them to the right outcome. And for most of those people, it's not
massive windfall, multi-billion-dollar financial gains. But I would also argue that I might be an outlier, but I really believe the tide is turning and that impact will be the primary value creator in the next decade. I really think this combination of things around politics and the pandemic, like people are just fed up with where tech has led us, and we'll start to wake up to a realization that tech can really actually be used to humanize and help people, and what could be worth more investment and more patronage than that. And so that's part of the reason I felt so strongly about creating a marketplace and a reimagined marketplace around impact technology, because I really see that as where the broader market is going. And it's not just a nonprofit or fundraising thing. So, I mean, for me, it's exciting because I see this repeated over and over again with every founder I talk to. For you all, it's service. It runs like it's so obvious that you are service oriented. You wanted to have more impact by, being, providing that service, and just were frustrated and felt blockaded against really letting that out. And this is what allows you to do that. And it's beautiful to watch, even just getting to know you in a 30-minute conversation.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This is an opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Thank you both for chatting, and it's great to get to know you both. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming by. Be sure to visit joinpond.com and jump in when you're ready.